So as we begin, fill in the blank. Go ahead and unmute yourselves because we're small. Conflict in the congregation is blank.
I just something's hidden. It's hidden.
Is what?
Hidden. People put it kind of quietly out there. They just don't talk to each other. They just hide it.
What I was thinking is occasional. It comes up with certain issues that happen periodically, but not all the time, just occasional.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd say, agree to both of those statements. And also that in a finicky finicky consumer society, since nobody likes conflict, except trolls and individuals on Facebook, it's a turnoff. And so it's a criteria people use. If there's surfaced conflict at a church, even if it's healthy, I may not want to stay because I don't like that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So lots of potential answers to fill in there, of course. Another word that could go in there is normal.
Oh, dang.
But we'll get to that in a moment. Let's start with scripture because that's a great place for us to start. Would somebody be kind enough to read that passage from Luke?
Sorry. Now, as they went on their way, Jesus entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks. So she came to him and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her."
All right, thank you, Vicki. So who are the principals in this conflict? This is a conflict between what and what?
Two sisters,
Between Mary and Martha?
right?
Two different
maybe-
visions of hospitality.
Ah.
I hear it
Actually,
called,
it may be a conflict only one person's upset, the other person isn't.
Good point.
it's
Right.
that being and doing and getting caught up in yourself between should I be doing something or just being.
Mhm. So it is all of those things. It's an interpersonal conflict, although Vicki rightly points out that Mary doesn't seem particularly, and how many of our conflicts in church or in other communities are really conflicts of one?
True,
Somebody's not happy, everybody else seems fine.
right? But now Jesus has been brought into the conflict.
Right.
So,
And Jesus really describes it as a conflict between a sort of, if you will, Protestant work ethic and the simplicity of faith or discipleship. And I think that's an interesting thing to keep in mind as we talk about conflict. There's usually an ideological principle underneath what people are expressing. They don't always know what it is.
what I was thinking was priorities too. One sister has
Sure.
one priority and the other sister has a different priority. And
You
Jesus
betcha.
is pointing that out. Basically, it's a choice. It's a difference in priorities.
That's probably never happened to you at church, though.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Is anybody in conflict with Jesus there?
What's that, Janice?
Is anybody in conflict with Jesus there?
Oh, that's a good question. What do you think?
Well, so far, Jesus has allowed it. He didn't bring this up himself. So Martha may feel a little bit
Mhm.
like, why is it, and he approves of it. So in a way, I guess she's in conflict with him now.
Continually, it seems. She's always yelling at Jesus,
You would have been here, Jesus. Oh, I'm jumping. ahead.
right? You can tell they're friends because she's just bitching at him all the time.
That's true. That's true. Good point.
So here's Webster's definition of conflict. Notice it starts with, sometimes we hear conflict and we immediately go to conflict is horrible. You know, the answer to that very first question that I put up is conflict is destructive and damaging. And that is the first definition that the Webster folks come up with too. It's a fight, it's a battle, it's a war. Then it starts to bring out some nuance, competitive or opposing action of incompatibles, right? Antagonistic, there's that word, state or action. A mental struggle resulting from incompatible or opposing needs, drives, wishes. And then the last one, you know, if you took a college lit class, you probably at some point heard that conflict is the essence of drama. Pretty much any story has to have some kind of conflict. And I had a fun time trying to think of what scripture passage to share, because there are plenty of stories about conflicts of one sort or another. Conflict is a sense that arises anytime people live together and are in relationship together. We'll talk about that in a second. Some potentially conflictual church situations. The worst one, of course, is the new carpet in the sanctuary. We once tried to put new carpet in our sanctuary and finally gave up back at Abiding Peace, which is when I started to study conflict in the congregation out of necessity. A big one is the style of the pastor, the pastoral minister. The pastor is too liberal, the pastor is too conservative, too friendly, not friendly enough. They don't visit enough, but they're also not in the office enough, right?
Yep.
This is the world in which we live. So lots of things about your ministry are potentially laden with conflict for our folks, or potentially place potentially a target on you for one thing or another. And I imagine we've all crossed that bridge. Time of worship. Just went through this with the congregation. Style of worship, those absolutely meaningless words, contemporary and traditional. And worship. There are now books called, Beyond the Worship Wars. So we love to fight about worship. The truth is, in any relationship of any depth, there will be conflict. If you think about your closest relationships, your dearest friends, your spouse, your family, they're never conflict free, right?
Nope, true.
In PowerPoint, you have access to this cache of images, and I typed in relationship, and these were two of the first pictures that popped up. I didn't type in conflict, I just typed in relationship.
Wow.
And these are the pictures. I mean, there were other pictures of people holding hands and smiling and skippy dippy, but I thought it was interesting that those popped right up. So, the conflict is part of being in relationship with other people. If you don't want conflict, then Hermitage is the place. This includes our relationships with each other in the church, relationships among lay members. It is less likely that we get into really pitched battles among lay people, but it happens. A lot of times, the really difficult conflictual situations revolve around leaders.
Mm-hmm.
That's just, so staff clergy and each other, there will be conflicts. Some conflict is generative, productive. there is a base level. We're going to talk about Kenneth Hawk's book. Do y'all know this book?
No.
Antagonists in the Church. He's actually rostered in our synod. He was the head of Stephen Ministry out in St. Louis for a long time. So out by you, Janice. Wonderful book. We're gonna spend some time with him over the next 45 minutes. Some conflicts are generative, right? Vatican II was a whole lot of Catholics coming together to really just rewrite the way that the church operated and the ways that it did worship. Very generative, potentially conflictual situation, right? Anytime we get together to hammer out a treaty or anything that's called a council is generally some potentially opposing forces coming together to try to do something positive. Worship conversations at the congregation and denominational level can be generative sources of conflict if we understand conflict as simply having different folks with different ideas and different purposes for the conversation all in the same room. The Treaty of Versailles, right, was a whole bunch of people with different ideas coming together. And that's an interesting one because there are also people who say the Treaty of Versailles led to World War II because they didn't solve the problem in the most productive way. So can you think of any other conflictual situations that actually have generative or positive, productive outcomes?
Treaties.
What?
Arms treaties.
Arms
nuclear
treaties, sure.
power arms treaties. It's
Yeah, I thought about SALT.
Even something like a mandated counseling or therapy
Yeah.
experience, whether it's your church board or your parole officer, there's usually there's a conflict based spark for that request, demand, or whatever.
Sure.
But if you're lucky, that would turn into a life-changing, behavior altering experience. So
yeah, no, that's a great example.
I'm just speaking, that's what my parole officer keeps telling me. So
Got that leg rest on there.
Well, staying on that, so the character of a generative conflict, here are a couple of ways that we can identify when a conflict is potentially generative and productive rather than destructive. The goal of the people involved is to create a dialogue and to solve a problem or a set of problems, right? That's when people come together to hammer out a treaty, or if your parole officer is sending you to treatment, the goal is for that to have a positive effect on your life. Parties in the dialogue feel that they're working toward a positive goal. So they come together, they want to make progress. They want to create excellent worship for the congregation, not to win the worship war, right? Some of it is all in the framing of the conversation oftentimes, and the framing really matters. They want to create peace in the world, or even in a situation with just a couple of people. So what's the tone of a conversation where these things would be present?
To me, I think you would have to show care about the other person,
Yeah.
that you care about what their position is, that it matters to you.
So some empathy too, yeah. What do the parties need to bring to the table or not bring to the table? You could ask that in the negative too, in order to engender a generative kind of dialogue.
I think definitely a willingness to compromise.
Mhm.
You have to come with that and display that right off the bat. I mean, if someone appears not to be willing to compromise, then everyone just kind of throws up their hands.
Trying to encourage people to state things so they're not blaming, but just
Right.
here's what what I want to see, or here's what I'd like us to be able to discuss instead of the put downs.
Yes.
Yeah, a non-reactive attitude and a curiosity about yourself and your quote adversaries as part of a system.
Yep.
And who are in some ways fulfilling roles that are hardwired into us. At least since the Garden of Eden, right?
Yeah, about that far back.
So
a sense of being able to see through the eyes of the other person, to empathize with the other person, a sense that all the parties are driving toward resolution. That's a big one. If you come together and you have 4 or 5 meetings and you realize that the people on one side of the table or one person around the table really has no interest in resolution, it's really hard to resolve the conflict. And it does happen. So here's the book. There are several books, and I'm going to put in, before we leave, someone remind me, I've got a copy of these slides in a PDF, and I've got a little bibliography that has a few books that I think are really helpful. There's another one called Clergy Killers that came out about the same time as this book. This book I think is incredibly helpful for simply understanding when conflict is destructive. It's just ideal. And that's a huge problem for us, because we either think everything is potentially destructive, or we think we can love everybody out of where they are. And neither of those things is really true. So this is what Hauck says in the book. Conflict is a fact of life throughout society, including in the church. Conflict that hones the edge of an organization and keeps it mindful of and true to its purpose is healthy. An organization with no conflict at all, and I don't know of one, must either have no purpose at all, or at best, a very frivolous purpose. So some conflict says there are people here who care about what we're about, and they're willing to go to bat for it. The most useful thing in this book, and I just realized in rereading the book that he more or less stole these categories from Speed Lee's in a different book, which I've also put on the bibliography, in case you want to check that out too. Speed Lee's is an Alban Institute guy. I'm guessing you all have heard of him. So Speed developed these categories, and Hauck put them into this pyramid, and I think it's incredibly helpful. So if you look at the pyramid, down at the bottom are problems to solve. Those are level 1 conflicts. They exist in any organization, any family system, any place where there's a relationship. You will cross problems to solve. It's also the largest category. So most of the conflict in our churches, we approach as problems to solve. Sometimes the problem rises up to the level of a disagreement, and that's when somebody starts to get a little dug in, right? And we're not necessarily all at the table happily looking for a resolution, but we've got a couple of people who are really engaged, and then it starts to get tough. Level 3 is contests, meaning winning is now more important than developing a healthy resolution of the conflict. As the higher you go on the pyramid, the more you get to the point where people are just trying to, these are your internet trolls, right? I'm not here to have dialogue with you about what I think about tax cuts. I'm here to tell you that you're a terrible person because of what you think. And I'll be just delighted if you engage with me, because I have no interest in changing my mind or learning anything here. So it's funny, this book was written before, about the time that people started to talk about the internet, but certainly long before social media. So level 1, parties collaborate on the solution to the problem, right? This is when everybody comes to the table and says, okay, we're going to have to change the time of worship because of X. So because we're now in a parish. And so we've got to decide what time worship is going to be. Let's figure this out. So they collaborate. There may be anger because, people still want their answer to be the right answer. But the focus remains on finding an amicable resolution to the conflict. At level 2, the disagreement level, the objective becomes colored. This is Hauck's language, colored with the need for self-protection. Now I kind of want my thing to be the thing because I really believe in my thing. Parties tend toward generalizations, worship needs to be at 10:30 because that's what time everyone worships. No one worships at any other time than 10:30. And people will be more guarded. That is the level where you have folks, sorry. Oh, good, suspected spam.
We'll hold Donna if you need to take that.
No, I don't want to sell my house. This is the level where if you work with people for a little while, you can find that there's something underneath, right? Why does worship have to be at 10:30? Because at my grandma's church, it was at 10:30 and I loved my grandma and that's where I learned to go to church. And if I have to worship at 9, it'll be like, my grandmother's legacy will mean nothing, which has nothing, that's not about worship time at all, right? So sometimes if we can get to what's underneath the disagreement, we can make people feel good about their grandmothers and also maybe consider another time. So level 3 is an interesting level. Level 3 can go in a few ways. The conflict becomes, at that point, it's a contest, right? It's win or lose. And people will see it that way, right? Solving the problem is no longer the objective. People are not necessarily driving toward resolution anymore. They are trying to win a contest. Healthy resolution is, that should say possible, is possible if not probable. And you'll notice, let's see, do I have let me go on. This is the rest of the chart. You'll notice that that third level actually gets divided in half when we add the antagonists in. So there's still a level at which you can solve the conflict and the conflict can be healthy at level 3. I'm going to go back, but it may not be possible. Sorry, just bouncing back and forth. This is the slide we were on. Okay. So healthy resolution possible at level 3, possibly not. All right, questions, comments? You guys okay?
Yeah.
Okay. If you find yourself in levels 3 to 5, you may be dealing with antagonists. And Ken Hauck's whole impetus for writing this book, Antagonists in the Church, is to help people recognize when what they're dealing with is actual antagonists rather than difficult people. They're rare, he notes, and I would imagine that that's been our experience in ministry, right? Actual antagonists, people who live on the level of 4 and 5 here, are pretty rare, right? Some folks are antagonistic, but they're not antagonists. Some people have poor social skills or a grating manner. They're just annoying. That doesn't necessarily make them antagonists, right? Antagonists are oppositional in service of a pathology. So antagonism is their thing. And they are not interested in solving this problem or coming to a resolution. They're simply interested in creating a situation that feeds a pathology. So being oppositional. Being oppositional is their raison d'etre. All right, Houck's definition of antagonists is this: antagonists are individuals who, on the basis of non-substantive evidence, they can give you evidence, it's not substantive evidence, right? They've got reasons why they feel the way that they feel, but if you scratch the reasons very much, they turn out to be usually nonsense. On the basis of non-substantive evidence, they go out of their way to make insatiable demands, usually attacking the person and performance of others. These attacks are selfish in nature, tearing down rather than building up, and are frequently directed against those in a leadership capacity. So you can see how this level of difficulty in a pathology, as Houck would call it, in a person is pretty rare, but it's also very dangerous. And we do have these folks in our churches.
We do.
And we can't work our way around them, which is why he wrote this book so long ago, because we do need to know when we're there. All right, so the last two levels of the pyramid, level 4 is fully oppositional, right? The good of the organization is not a concern at this level. Being right and punishing those who are wrong is the level 4 fight or flight. So fight or flight is, I want to fight and I need you to flee. All I'm doing here is trying to knock you off the log. And level 5 is intractable situations. It's pretty self-explanatory. Conflict runs amok. The goal is destruction, scorched earth kind of thinking and action. All right, that makes sense. And you'll see that they've added also to the, and this is also kind of a combination of Houck and Speedley's, the levels of the operational levels, I think I would call them, of antagonists, because I want to make sure we maintain that distinction between antagonism, which is a behavior, and antagonists, which are folks who are dealing with a particular pathology that, you know, without professional help is not going to get better. So you have your hardcore antagonists. You're not going to fix them. Major antagonists, probably not going to fix those folks either. They operate in level 4. And your moderate antagonists are sometimes people who tag along with the harder core folks. We certainly have seen in the political landscape over the last few years how quickly we can foment a movement on all over the political spectrum, and how quickly you can get folks to just jump on a bandwagon. Those are sometimes your folks who fall in the category of moderate antagonists, who then just glom on to folks who are truly dangerous. All right, what do you need to know, pastors? Resolution is likely at levels 1 and 2. We talked about that, right? Where people are operating in good faith, they really do want to find a solution. That's actually, those levels are really healthy for congregations, because you can't make progress on things that you care about. There's my KLC language, right? Until you're willing to come to the table and hammer some stuff out. Otherwise, you're just kicking everything over to the side. Resolution is possible at level 3. It may be necessary to name unhealthy behaviors and agree on terms for the discussion, right? When you've got people who are operating at level 3 but aren't dangerous antagonists, that's when you sort of need to start making covenants for behavior and saying, you know, let's come together and talk about this. Here's some ground rules for our conversation. We're not going to attack each other. We're not going to use negative language about one another's person. Resolution, highly unlikely at level 4, impossible at level 5. I would say almost impossible at level 4. Antagonists are characterized by their disinterest in resolution. their interest in antagonism. There are horror stories in this book and other books of the sort about people who will follow pastors around or will send letters to your next congregation after you finally give up and leave. You know, I mean, it's happened to people. It's again, very rare, but you know, you're dealing with pathological folks at that level. Antagonists tend to attract followers, right? The followers may be benign and gullible, or they're those moderate antagonist folks who are just looking for a leader. They need a mouthpiece. All right, questions? Everybody okay? All right. Why do we have antagonists in the church? Well, we're a voluntary association, right? Has everybody read that article that Dwight Chiley wrote about the shift from the age of association to the age of authenticity? I'll send it out. It's really good.
I think I have read it, but I would love to have a source for it. So yeah, if you would send that out, that'd be great.
I will. I will send it to you.
It's an awesome article.
Uh-huh. He's just a great thinker. I really like him.
Just
right.
briefly, it talks about why we're having trouble getting younger people to come in general to churches. It's just a difference in mindset. Of course, you know, some churches are attracting them hugely. Some of the really big churches do. But that article kind of talks about that, just a change in mindset of generations and people. What they're looking for has changed, and what they considered normal or whatever has sort of changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've described this as, you know, the sort of sense that millennials don't want to join institutions. We've been talking about that for a few years, but he's grabbing some sociological research that says we're really just in a kind of an overall shift of mindset away from association where you join stuff. You know, millennials also aren't joining the Elks Club.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
To an age of authenticity, and the church as an organization of authenticity looks different than when you came and joined and got your pledge card.
Exactly.
Anyway, sorry, that's probably a different presentation, but we make space for antagonists right now because we don't want to lose more people, right? It is possible that when you're dealing with someone who is on a kind of dangerous conflictual level, and you've said, I don't know if we can, you know, continue to make space for this person, that someone else will say, oh, but we can't lose another person, or we can't lose their money.
Right.
Right. You know, that's just that's the age in which we live. We believe in what Jesus taught us about loving people and about the power of love. We forget that even Jesus drew some hard lines. You know, just because Jesus said love everybody doesn't mean that he said that you should allow them to abuse you. So we forget that part. And Luther's explanation of the 8th commandment can get us in trouble here, where, you know, we're continually trying to cast the best light on people's behavior, which is the correct approach, of course. But Dan, you opened your mouth.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, using the old language, you know, bearing false witness means describing a situation untruthfully.
Right.
And there's a remarkable freedom in describing a dysfunctional, or in this case, you know, antagonist-driven system truthfully, and that is sometimes the not only the best construction, but the most healthy one that will help the church prevail. So
yes, naming the behavior is certainly all right. If you encounter an antagonist in the wild, document everything. Save every email. People often don't do this until it's gone on for a while. And then you've lost stuff. Now, these days, it's a lot easier because we do have things in textual form and we have emails and you can go back and pick things up. But write verbatims, go back to your CPE days and sit down and write a verbatim if you have a really troubling encounter with somebody. It'll serve you down the road. Let your counsel in. Now, the challenging thing here is that oftentimes these are folks who serve on your council.
Mhm.
So, start with your president, start with your executive team. If the person is your president, I hope not, but if your council president is an antagonist, it's happened, then talk to your vice president. But get someone on board in the leadership team sooner rather than later, and know that they already know. There are so many people who are aware of what's going on when this stuff's happening, but they don't, first of all, they don't want to go around your leadership. And if the pastor is not saying this is not okay, then I guess it must be okay, especially since they may be aware of it, but since it most likely targets you, they may not know the depth of it. So we want to bring people in, be very clear with the person, right? You can love them as you deal with their behavior, but you will not love an antagonist out of their behavior. Right? This is the distinction when we're talking about actual antagonists. These are folks who need professional help. And so don't let them have all your energy. Right? Use your energy for the people that are helping you build a healthy community, build the kingdom of God. It's so hard because, man, you go home and, it's like the 17 people who shake your hand and say good sermon, and the one person who says, I don't know about that part. And you go home and that's the only thing you can remember. That part. Yeah. Be clear about why the behavior is unacceptable. Talk about, if you have been hurt personally, and at this level of behavior, people are trying to hurt you personally, so you probably have. Some blow is going to land. And you can talk about why you've been hurt personally, but keep the conversation about the health and well-being of the whole community. Because unfortunately, hurting you personally is the goal. So where with a healthy relationship, being able to go to someone and say, wow, that really hurt my feelings, is going to be good for the relationship, and you're going to find resolution. If you say that to somebody whose goal is antagonizing you, then that's just another arrow in their quiver. Okay, that's what I got. What do you want to talk about? There is, of course, lots more literature, etc., on how to deal with conflict. I would like to also do that presentation, how to deal with conflict generally. But I think the first thing we have to know is what kind of conflict we're dealing with. Because if we try out all of our wonderful Brene Brown ways of dealing with other people on people who are pathological, we're just going to be frustrated. So, thoughts?
Well, I hope you will do that other presentation just on conflict in general. That sounds great. As well as the one about the article we talked about, the change in the mindset. Do a presentation on that too. Yeah, that'd be interesting too. Does that make sense? Does that make sense or not?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Well, what keeps popping out to me is because we're in the midst of just deciding about a time change on worship. So you said that you've done that. How were you able to come about that? What I've decided, and we've been going about this on and off for quite some time. There are morning people and there are night people, so to speak. It just is. There are people that are oriented. That's where they feel the best. They feel good. They just naturally get up real early, and they want to have church at that time. They say it's so we can get it done and get on for our day. That's the rationale is let's have it early so we can get on with our day. So I hear that. And then you have those who say, I just can't get here that early. for health reasons. However,
Uh-huh.
we've even had the services at late at 11 o'clock and they still didn't come. Those who can't make it on
Uh-huh.
for health reasons, you know what I'm saying? Or we've had evening services and they still can't come, you know, because of all this. So, I mean, I kind of see through all these different rationale, you know, for these things. But what I've come to is mostly just saying that, and we're going to have a vote on this, whether we're going to meet at 9 or at 10. And I'm just going to say that we need to vote on what we feel like is best for the church, not our individual preferences. I'm going to say that, you know, we're going to vote on what's best for the church as we look at trying to involve more people in our ministries, which means get more people in the church, because that's a main concern.
Sure.
So that's my rationale. That's my way of presenting it now after a long time, not just over this. We've been back and forth over some time about this. So what were you able to do? And you said your church has just decided on a time of worship. Donna, did you say that?
No. One of the churches that I'm dealing with as DEM had a conversation about it, and one person said, oh, more spam. One person said, everyone has to be flexible as we decide this, and I am not moving our time. Literally, I thought, oh, I love church people. You know what if I had, like, you know, a sandbox to play in on this one, I would say we're going to worship at 9 o'clock for a month, and we're going to worship at 10 o'clock for a month, and then we're going to add up the attendance in those 2 months.
And what draws the most visitors?
Whichever month had the most people.
That's a good idea. It really is. See, we've actually kind of done both. What we did was the last time we had this discussion, it was because we wanted to have Sunday school, and people are like, well, you have Sunday school after the service, you know, and all this kind of thing. But they've tried that before and it never works for a variety of reasons. We kind of know that. So we said, well, let's have Sunday school at 9 and worship at 10. Well, they went for that, but we also said, okay, we'll go to 9 during the summer. And that was kind of to appease those who weren't too happy. But now we're coming time to go to that 9 o'clock during the summer. And we've had others come to the church council and say, well, we think it'd be better to have a consistent worship time all year round. And then we do know there are some people that have trouble coming earlier due to health problems. So we're going to bring it up again at a meeting coming up before too long. And like I said, all I can really, I just have come to the feeling that it's just, you have morning people and you have evening people.
Yeah.
You know, you just do, and that will always be that way. So as far as individual preference, that's just the way it is. But we need to make the decision based on whatever we think is best for the church. So if they think it is better to have a consistent time throughout the year, okay. And then, you know, what other concerns, you know, whatever you might think. But we are thinking about, again, like you said, we'll have visitors be the most comfortable, that kind of thing. That's a good point too.
Well, and that's why changing worship times is.
Well, we only did the 9 o'clock to keep, because a majority voted for the 10 o'clock so that we could have Sunday school at 9 o'clock. But there was a substantial amount that did vote for 9 o'clock, and they were really adamant, the ones that were voting for it. So that's why we did the 9 o'clock during the summer. I know that seems odd to go earlier during the summer, but it's like, okay, guys, if that's what you want to do.
No,
So
a lot of congregations do that.
Do they?
Yeah, because people want to go do stuff.
So anyway, we're having this vote pretty soon. And like I said, all I can do is just say, just vote whatever you think is best for the church based on these things rather than individual preference. This is really not a vote on what you think is best for you, what you would prefer. What do you think is best for the church? That's all I can say really in the end. So hopefully that'll make them think a little bit anyway. But as I say, all the various arguments, I've heard them all, and I've seen it all in action. The ones who say they just can't get up physically, they have ailments and all this kind of stuff, they can't get here early. At one point, we had to have, for other reasons, service at 11. They still didn't come. We've had evening worship. They don't come to that either. So it's kind of like, I don't know.
That's why I'd let them vote with their bodies.
It's a good idea, though.
Instead of telling us when you'll come to church, show us when you'll come to church, and then we'll make a decision based on that.
Yeah, good idea. So then that was interesting. I was thinking about that in our situation, but then I was also just to talk about antagonists. I hadn't thought about certain people in the congregation in that way. So that was interesting because there are some that I can think of in that way. But then the other thing, that really came out to me was just the idea that what is behind when people have a strong position on something, kind of what's behind it, as you were talking about the one that it really had to do with their, their grandmother start church time. So that was really a good thing to think about. I hadn't thought about that.
So in line with that question, I was trying to think, or that statement, I was trying to think of a question that might help people get to that underneath state. Donna, do you have some recommendations? I'm thinking of those coaching questions. This is really important to you. Do you know where it comes from, or where does it come from, or what?
Tell me what more about why this is
Yeah.
important to you.
Kind of getting at
There's
that. Yeah.
There's a great book, which I recommend for all kinds of stuff. It also an Alban Institute book called Discerning God's Will for Your Congregation. It's two guys, Chuck Olson and Danny Morris. And moving toward the process of discernment, they have this fairly lengthy set of steps that you have to go through. And one of them is being able to lay down the baggage, if you will. I don't think they call it baggage, but the baggage that you're bringing into the room. And that's a process of trying to get to, what are the real reasons that I don't want to worship at 9 a.m. And it may not be not being able to get out of bed. I did put in the chat. There are 5 books there. There's the Acrobat link is the handout,
Slides.
which is all the slides. And then the Dwight Shiley article is the last thing. It's actually an article from the Lutheran. I'd forgotten it was in the Lutheran.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I had seen that one. Yeah.
So yeah, it's good stuff. All his stuff is good.
Yeah.
Those Episcopalians speaking into Lutheran circles are doing a fine job. She said underneath the mall at the moment.
Apparently they know a few things about conflict.
Apparently they might.
Yeah.
Right? There'll probably be some good Methodist experts on conflict in the next few years too.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. Ooh.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Glad we've solved all of ours.
No, but there is something to be said that we're still standing after some of this. When people talk about the vote back from 2009, 2010, and thinking about the fact that some of that, not all of it, obviously, but some of that's in the rearview mirror is good. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Every once in a while it comes up. We still have congregations that are mad about it, and every once in a while one of them leaves.
Delayed reaction.
It's the opposite of premature. I don't know what that is. Slow cooked.
Yeah.
All right,
Well, I think I appreciate, I was just going to say, I'm getting ready for a meeting where I know I need to call together some people on the, music, AV, call some people together.
Oh.
And some people are really upset about it, a few things. And I'm not sure we'll be able to make it through a meeting without having some conflict, but it's time to. And
Mhm.
yeah. And I constantly wonder what else is going on for this person underneath. I think there's more going on.
Well, it's also a good place to
Kinda.
get out our please use I statements
Yeah.
thing too, because I am beyond tired in the church of people telling us how everybody else feels.
Mhm.
People are saying, Pastor,
Mhm.
tell me how you feel.
Good point.
And doing it in a loving, caring way. But of course, I always want everything to go well. So,
Sure.
I don't want to hear the conflict, right? No, tell me what's going on. Let's work through this.
Mhm.
So here we
They're
go.
really helpful. I mean, sometimes it
Yeah.
really helps. It helps us see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
The
And I
surface
think
level stuff.
the residual of I don't want to change because it's hard, and so
Yeah.
when I'm pushing change here, then we get some of that blowback because, but we didn't have to do this stuff in the past.
Mhm.
When we're tired from the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
We just wanted to go back the way it was.
I think fear, fear drives a lot of strange behaviors sometimes, and it's sometimes unfounded fear, but still it's there. It's real for the person.
Hmm,
So, yeah.
True.
Indeed. Well, I appreciate all of you spending this hour.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is
Great
hope it was helpful.
resources.
Very
Yeah,
helpful. Thank you.
always helpful.
Absolutely.